In Chief Justice John Roberts' opinion denying the Trump administration the right to insert a citizenship question in the census, the Chief Justice wrote that executive branch officials must, quote, offer genuine justifications for important decisions, reasons that can be scrutinized by courts and the interested public. Accepting contrived reasons would defeat the purpose of the enterprise. Joining our discussion now is Neil Katyal. He's the former acting U.S. Solicitor General and an MSNBC legal contributor. He has argued 39 cases before the United States Supreme Court. Most lawyers don't ever get to argue one. Neil, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. And your reading of the census decision.
Well, I think it's quite a resounding victory for the challengers, and I should say that I represented the United States House of Representatives in this case. Now, before doing that, some years ago, I represented the presidency, President Obama, and Congress, and I can tell you, Lawrence, that when you're standing up before the Supreme Court and telling the Supreme Court the president believes X or made this decision because of reason Y, it's really hard to lose that case. You really almost have to try to lose it. It's kind of like failing a class at Yale. You really got to try. And here, that's exactly what happened. It's a remarkable opinion by the Chief Justice, which basically said President Trump's reasons were contrived. I mean, that's pretty powerful language. And here's what he meant. The Trump administration said, oh, we're adding the citizenship question to enforce the Voting Rights Act. Now, I'm not sure the president has even heard of the Voting Rights Act. He certainly never brought any enforcement action under it, so it seemed implausible on its face. And the evidence at the trial really showed this was a bogus reason. And so what the Chief Justice is essentially saying is, look, Mr. President, you can lie to the American people. I'm not going to get involved in that. But don't you dare lie to the federal judiciary.
What is there now? The president is tweeting, can we delay the census?
Yeah, so the two problems with that. Number one, his own lawyers and the U.S. Solicitor General have come to the Supreme Court before and said, we can't delay the census, and use that to try and bypass the Court of Appeals and race their case to the Supreme Court. Now that that gambit has failed, they're trying to say, oh, the president is trying to say, well, maybe we can delay the census. There's one problem with that. It's called Article 1 of the Constitution. So you don't have to go very far. I know we have a president who doesn't like to read and certainly not read the Constitution, but literally it's page 1 of the Constitution. The census has to take place every 10 years. That's 2020. And it's been true since 1790. We've always had a census then. So, you know, he can try that. It would be blatantly unconstitutional. And
it can sound quite reasonable to people that there be a question about citizenship on the census. Are you a United States citizen? But in that same provision of the Constitution that you mentioned, which I happen to have in front of me, page 1, as we now call it, it says that the census is to count persons. It could have said count citizens, but it says it's to count persons.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other important thing is that the Census Bureau itself has said if you add the citizenship question, you're going to get massive undercounting to the tune of 8%. And that undercounting is going to be minorities. And we now know, because of some recently discovered documents, that there has been a Republican plot all along to add the citizenship question, not because of the Voting Rights Act, but because they wanted to suppress the number of minorities who would fill out the census. And this is not like just like some random survey. This is really important. The census is what decides how many people are sent to the Congress from a particular district and how many electoral college votes they get and how much federal spending they get for all sorts of social programs. It's a big, big deal.
And what is the theory of the undercount? The citizenship question would produce an undercount. Why?
Because, you know, if you're illegal, if you're not undocumented, you're going to obviously be afraid to answer questions from a government official. And so one of the whole things is if you say, oh, I'm not a citizen, then they're worried that these folks are worried, well, then maybe the ICE or others are going to come knocking.
Yeah, that is the thing about census takers. They're not there for anything other than data. And it's hard to believe that all the government wants to know is the basic data. They don't even really care what the name is at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.